Hey guys, welcome back to another video. So in this video, the subject will be taking the information that you are trying to learn from books, art courses, art videos, art magazines, all of that stuff, right? Taking that information and actually learning the information in a way that will get you free, in a sense, from constantly having to learn that information over and over and over again. And I'm going to, of course, base this off of something that I have been doing, specifically the past couple of months. I'm not sure exactly how many months, but it has applying what I'm about to talk about in my art has allowed me to improve my art in ways that I thought would take me a lot longer. So yeah, we're gonna go ahead and get into it. So the gist of what I'm going to be talking about, and I'll go into detail, is when you are learning something, and I'm specifically talking about art, and I'm going to be talking about my experience with learning with art, because I'm sure I'm probably not the only one. When I started learning, like really taking my art serious, yes, I was reading books, watching videos, and copying, following, and or following along in those steps and the courses and the books and stuff like that, and thinking that I was learning what I was going to need to learn in order to do this going forward by myself. And I think the one thing out of all the courses and stuff that I've done, there have been very few instructors, including books and videos and YouTube videos and magazines and stuff like that, that I don't think really put enough emphasis on applying the information that they're teaching you over and over and over again, and not just copying those works over and over and over again, but taking the knowledge that they are giving you and applying it to your own works, to the best of your knowledge. And what I mean by this, like, so I'm going to go, of course, based off of, my experience was, after completing these courses, I would feel like this sense of accomplishment because I completed the course, or I completed the book, and I felt, confident. I was kind of feeling myself. And then when it came to trying to do my own art piece, illustration, comic, whatever the case may be, painting, yada, 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 I felt completely lost. And now learning that information, and applying that information, and then I now feel like I have to go take another course to learn the information all over again, or retake the course I just learned all over again, because at this point, like, I feel like I did something wrong, because why don't I know this information, by heart? I should be able to do this out of my mind now. Was the thought process. And what I want to talk about is really what it's going to take to really learn the information that you are getting from these resources to learn how to draw. And I'm going to use the example of drawing a face. I'm going to go based on my process and the process that I'm still doing on drawing the face. And you'll probably maybe hear me kind of flipping through my sketchbook so I can kind of, be a little bit more accurate with my process with this. So when it came to really going back to the drawing board, I'll say, and really trying to understand how I can get comfortable drawing faces from my imagination and being able to draw different faces, being able to draw different characters, right? And I think that's the first thing you need to do is set a clear goal on what you're trying to do. And it can be a goal within a larger goal, right? So say I want to, of course, you guys have seen my videos, I'm trying to create comics, right? Trying to get into the comic industry, independent comic industry anyway. And so my main goal would be, creating my own comics and illustrations. But then there are sub goals within that, under, comics, there's, creating Lynk and creating this and creating that. There are different comics that I want to create. But then there are subcategories within those, right? And they might overlap with the illustration ones, being able to create characters, empowering Jesus, tongue-tied, empowering characters that stick with people. And, maybe that falls under illustrations as well. And then, okay, when we're talking about characters, well, what are we talking about? Now, I want to create characters that look unique, and then I'm talking about, okay, well, what makes the character look unique? We're talking about clothing. We're talking about personality, trying to get that personality to show through the image. What does their face look like? Okay, so now we've got these different categories, so let's go to faces. Okay, well, what about the face? Different, unique face shapes, unique features, all that it encompasses under faces. Okay, well, now that we're dealing with faces and we're talking about unique shapes and unique eyes, now we can start kind of breaking that stuff down. Well, what's the underlying shape of a face? Well, you kind of need to understand roughly what, to an extent, roughly what the skull looks like. Okay, so let's start there. Breaking down the skull. And you don't have to have this medical academic understanding of the skull. It would be, okay, what is the overall shape of the skull? How can I learn to draw the skull in a way that I would understand it being a skull? And I mean like a generalized, a simplified skull. I don't want to say generalized, but a simplified skull. Learning how to draw the simplified skull. So that means taking reference from actual skull references, whether it be Pinterest, YouTube, actual pictures of skulls that you find online, whatever you're getting your reference from, and taking that actual part and breaking it down and understanding the basic shapes. Okay, well, we know that the skull as a whole, I'm going to break it up into it's made of two separate parts, right? You've got the jaw, where it goes up and down, that's how you talk, and then you've got the rest of the skull. So right now I know the skull is broken up into two parts. And then understanding those shapes. Well, okay, if I'm looking at the skull from a front view, that top part looks like a circle with the sides kind of sliced off. Or, so maybe you might have it where the rest of the face or the rest of the skull kind of encompasses that circle shape, the whole circle shape, right? Everyone has their own way of drawing the skull. Okay, so that's the general shape of the front view of that top portion of the skull. Well, then you have to figure out for yourself that bottom part, what's the general shape of the jaw part of the skull, and making notes to yourself. Okay, now what does the skull look like from a third, from a 3/4 view? What is it looking like? What's the general shape for the skull from a side view? And then now we're gonna start breaking down the skull. Where do the eye sockets lie? How big are the eye sockets? Where's the zygomatic bone, which is your cheekbone? I think that's the cheekbone, right? The zygomatic bones or cheekbone. How does the cheekbone look? And of course, everyone's face is different. So, but you want to get like a simplified shape of the skull, understanding how the cheekbone fits into the skull. The top part of the jaw, will technically be the bottom part of the skull, the actual skull part, not the jaw part. But where your teeth are, what does that shape look like? What does it look like from the 3/4 view? What does it look like from the side view? And then when you're learning all this information, you're taking personalized notes within your, whether it be on paper that you keep in a binder or a sketchbook, whatever. You take personalized notes that you are learning from, whether it be books or whatever art resources you're learning from. You make personalized notes so that way if you have to come back to that information, you personally understand what you are trying to tell yourself. Don't try to write notes based off of, well, if someone looks in my sketchbook, will they understand what I'm trying to say? Or let me write word for word what this person is saying. And no, write it in your own way, in a way that you understand it. Don't be concerned about anyone else, because these are notes that you are going to be using to come back to later in reference. So then, of course, you say you now have a general understanding of the skull. You can draw it simplified and different views and different angles for the most part, right? There might be what I call like certain blind spots where you might not feel as comfortable. Maybe you don't feel comfortable drawing the skull from a back 3/4 view, or maybe you don't feel comfortable drawing the skull from an up view, an up 3/4 view, and that's okay. You want to kind of like generalize. You don't want to have to feel like you have to draw the skull from a 360 every angle with no issues, right? You don't have to go that far into it. If you feel like you're struggling or coming across like a blind spot that you are continuing to find yourself struggling with, well, at that point, take like maybe 30 minutes to an hour, study that blind spot that you're having, and then go back to your work, right? So say you've got the skull. Okay, now we're going to work on the muscles of the skull. Doesn't have to be detailed or anything like that. Maybe you might have just maybe a few illustrations from the different views of what the muscles look like, and that's good enough for you, right? You don't have to know them on name or whatever. You just kind of have an idea of where these muscles lay on the face, and maybe what they control. What controls the eyebrows, what controls the jaw being able to move up and down and side to side. What controls the lips being able to move and stuff like that, right? Being able to scrunch the nose up and stuff like that. And so you go from there, and then maybe you go from maybe learning the planes of the face. You got an idea of what the planes look like, and then maybe you go into the eyes, right? And then you want to really understand the eyes. So especially because characters, the eyes can be very expressive. So now you're going into understanding how big the eyeball is within the actual eye socket, and how much of the eye is actually covered with skin and folds and stuff to really make eyes unique. And then maybe you want to study what different eyes look like from different ethnicities groups and males and females and stuff like that, and taking notes within those subdivisions. And then maybe the next thing you do is you study the nose and the different widths of the widths of nose and the heights and the curvature of the bridge and all this stuff that helps make a character unique. And you make notes. And I think I really want to emphasize that, making notes on the things that you are learning. And the next, same thing, go to the lips, go to the lips and stuff like that. And then, of course, also studying the different shapes of what a face can be. Some people have more elongated faces. Some people have shorter faces. Some people have more square-like faces. And then taking all of this information, you have your notes, you have the studies that you've done, and yada yada yada, and this can take as long as you want it to take. It can be over months or weeks, or however you want to do that, while you continue to work on your own work, your own stuff. And that way, when you're starting to try to create more unique characters and you're trying to pull from different things, you can go back to your notes and be like, okay, well, I have notes on what wider noses look like, and I can't remember off the top of my head, but let me go reference my notes. I can't really look like, if I want to really draw the characters with longer lips but thin, like a longer mouth but like thinner lips or wider lips, or whatever the case may be, and you have those notes that you can reference to. And then what you would want to do, or what I would do, what I'm doing is I'm creating faces, generalizing the kind of a shape for a head, because I've understood the shape of the skull and stuff like that. And I've been practicing on, roughing out the guidelines of where everything lays on the face, going through the whole process. And I'm just kind of shorthanding this. Like, I'm kind of trying to make this video short, so I'm not going through like everything, talking about the planes of the face and, making the guidelines of the face and, where everything lays on the face. Like, that stuff you want to study, I understand. But once you know that information mentally, now you can play with it. So now if you want to, say, have someone with a longer nose, well, now you can drop that nose length down. And if you're still not quite sure on maybe how to draw the nose from a 3/4 view, well, if you have notes on that, you can go ahead and reference that from your notes. And if you don't have it, well, you can do a quick study on that and then reference the notes that you've taken to that particular drawing or illustration. And then what's going to happen is, as you continue to do more unique faces and you continue to, try to remember as much as you can, but also reference your notes when you absolutely have to, you'll find over time that you'll reference your notes less, because you'll start to solidify that information that you've been learning. And the more you do it, aka mileage, practice, the more you'll get used to doing it, and you won't have to use your notes as much. Maybe you'll only have to use your notes when you are doing a character with a feature that you really don't draw too often, or from an angle you really don't draw too often. Or like I said, if you have that blind spot where you're like, dang, I haven't drawn a face from like a 3/4 view looking up from the left side in like a year, for whatever reason, whatever. I forgot how to do that. Let me go ahead and do a quick 30-minute session on practicing the face from that angle, so now I can have those notes for reference later. You can do what you have to do, and then you kind of have that, and then if you come across that problem again, you can reference the notes that you've taken from the last time you had that issue, and you might not have to do another study session to understand your, what I call, blind spots in your art. And as you continue to, like I said, draw these things over and over again, you solidify that information and you have to draw it less. And if you're an artist, I'll give an example. If you've ever drawn, like, if you do fan art and there's a particular character that you genuinely love and you draw that character over and over and over again, and you've always had to use reference when you draw that character, well, at some point in time, whether you realize it or not, you start having to use less reference when you draw that character, because you're starting to solidify what goes into making that character look like that character. So you don't have to use reference as much when it comes to drawing that character. And then you get to a point where you can just draw it from your mind without any reference at all. Or say an example would be, I'll just do this. You're drawing I'm going to go basic here. You're drawing a stick figure. I'm going to say a basic stick figure, right? And I'm, using this as very simplified, because let's say you're trying to learn how to draw a stick figure. So you got to draw the head, and say you've never drawn a stick figure before, right? So you're looking at a stick figure and you're drawing the head, and you draw the little line for the neck, and then you draw the line for the shoulders, and then you draw the line for the midsection, and then the line for the hips, and then the lines for the legs, and the lines for the arms, and the circles for the hands, and the circles for the feet. And then you have to, slowly and surely, you're picking up on what goes into making that stick figure. So say the next time, maybe 10 stick figures down, you're drawing the stick figure and you're like, okay, well, I know there's the head, so I know there's a circle, so I don't need to reference that. Then I know there's a small line for the neck, and then there's a line for the shoulder, and then there's a line for the midsection. So you've got that. And then maybe you're like, dang, but I forgot what I have to do for the arms again. So now you just reference the arms and the hips and the legs, because you've already memorized the head, the neck, the shoulder line, the torso line. And then say maybe 30 more drawings down the road, you've solidified more information. So now you know how to draw the head, the neck, the shoulders, the arms, the torso line, and the hip line, but you can't really you still haven't got there to where you've memorized the feet or the legs and the feet, right? So now you just reference that. And as you continue to draw it over and over and over and over and over again, there's going to be a point where you can just do it without having to reference anything. And then maybe there's that one time where, you're, say, for whatever, like I said, I'm using the stick figure as a basic idea so you guys can kind of get the concept. You're drawing the stick figure with the left leg up and the right arm up. And you're like, dang, I don't know how to do that. So you draw what you know and what you feel that you know. And then you just reference the parts that you're struggling with, which would be having the left leg up and having the right arm up. And you just reference that, you make notes, and you draw that. And then if you ever have to do it again, well, you've already got a base to kind of work from, because you've already made notes on how to previously do it. So you can now reference what you've done. And then if you need to reference other material, you can do that as well. And then once again, as you continue to draw that over and over and over and over again, you solidify that information little by little to the point where you get to the point where you don't need it anymore. And I think that is how you get the most out of any of the drawing courses or drawing books or drawing material that you have. You take that information, you break it down in a way that you understand it, even if that involves also changing a few things. Like I'll say, like the shapes and stuff, like, maybe someone draws the nose and block shapes, and you like, block shapes don't really work for me. I need to draw, like, doing circular and ovals work best for me. Then do that. Don't feel like you are stuck to what the instructor is teaching you, or how they're teaching you anyway. But yeah, it's literally taking what you've learned, making notes on what you've learned in a way that you understand. Don't worry about everyone else, in a way that you understand, and then just putting in the mileage. And over time, key thing there, over time, you will get better and better at it as you continue to draw it over and over again, putting in that mileage, and to a point when then you'll look back and be like, dang, like, I can actually draw this stuff now without either feeling as frustrated or not even having to look at reference, because I have solidified that information. So yeah, like I said, I'll try to do a blog on this to hopefully help you guys understand more of what I'm trying to say, and show you guys a little bit of my sketchbook, images from my sketchbook, to kind of show you what I mean as I'm applying this into my own practice. But I hope you guys found this useful. I hope you guys have been enjoying this new format of having the sped up videos with me kind of voicing or doing kind of like a rant. I've been enjoying it. I hope you guys have been enjoying it. And maybe going forward, I'll actually put what the topic of discussion is, so that way you guys can maybe have that to reference as well. So I thank you guys for listening. I appreciate you guys for the watches and the views, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace out.